Hey guys, welcome back. Today we'll be going through development questions. So yeah, let's get started. I believe last time we were on this and foreign and far off is done, but we'll just quickly revise. There are 8 types of data types: number, string, boolean, undefined value, null value, symbol, bigint, and object. Symbol is a primitive data type introduced in year 6. It's used to create unique identifiers. Even if two symbols are same description, they are always unique. For example, null and undefined is the concept of which is also there. Variables and function declarations are moved to top of their respective scopes. There is a compilation phase. Next, the difference between let constant where is globally scooped. Let and constant blocks rule. Const cannot be changed, whereas let can be changed in the later part of the code. Let and const are both foisted but not initialized, which leads to temporal dead zone. Temporal dead zone is the time where a variable when a time between entering a scope and the point where a variable declared with let and const is actually initialized. Temporal dead zone refers to the time entering the scope and the point where a variable declared with let or const is actually initialized. Entering a scope and a variable where it is actually defined. During this period, memory exists in memory but cannot be accessed. If I try, I'll get a reference error. Closure in GS, inner function has access to variables outside of its function. Just variable outside its lexical scope. How can you define a function? Higher order function. It is a function that treats other functions as either by taking them as arguments or returning them. A pure function is a function that always returns the same output for same inputs. There is no side effects, doesn't rely on external state, makes code more predictable and easier to test. I'm just switching off my alarm. Difference between function declaration and function expression. Declarations are hosted, expressions are not. What is immediately invoked function? Connects as soon as it is defined. How do you add or remove properties of an object dynamically? To check if it exists. This refers to the object in the current that is executing the current function. And the difference between foreign and far off codes. Foreign is basically for objects. Object in the sense key value pairs. And far off is for retrievable values like arrays and all. How to remove element? Push, pop. Push will insert add, pop will remove comment, shift unshift. Shift will remove from start and shift will add to start. Okay. Splice means it will add at a particular index one. What is the purpose of mod function? Creates a new array. Yeah, I think we have to start from here. So what is the purpose of a map function? The map creates a new array with the result of calling with the results of calling a provided function on every element in the array. For example, I have const number equal to 1 2 3 4 5. I can simply use a map. Const double numbers equal to numbers dot map brackets num array num into 2. Right? It creates a new array with the results of calling a function on every element in the array. The difference between filter and find methods. Filter returns a new array with all elements that pass the test. I'll do one thing. Yeah, this is better. Uh, Filter returns a new array with all elements that pass the test. Find returns the first elements that satisfy the condition. Find returns the first element satisfy the condition. For example, numbers is this. Even numbers equal to numbers dot filter num percentage to equal to 0. And yeah. Explain the difference between sum and every method. Sum method returns true if at least one element in the array satisfied the provided testing function. Stops iterating as soon as it's find an element that satisfies the condition. Returns false if no element satisfies the condition. Returns true if all the elements in the array satisfy the provided testing function. Stops iterating as soon as it finds an element that doesn't satisfy the condition. Every return true if all the elements in the array satisfy the provided testing function. It stops iterating as soon as it finds an element that doesn't satisfy the condition. For example, And in the concept people, I'll just check people.sum if my person.age. Means if any person above age is above 13 will return true, and every means all persons age must be greater than 20. And you select the element in the term using JavaScript. Yeah. And the term using JavaScript. How do you select an element? Done using JavaScript. I hope I'm not it. We can use document.get document ID. I wish this was a line. Get element ID, let elements I class name, get element what I have. How do you create and append elements to the DOM? We can use the create element keyword, set its content, new paragraph context, text content, add some attribute, new paragraph ID, and class name. Create a text node. Okay, how do you create and append elements to the DOM? I think I should write this. First I'll create new element, new paragraph, new. Okay, then I'll just set its context. New paragraph, text content. create text or text dot create text additional append text node to the paragraph. New paragraph dot append child text node. Append the new paragraph using name document not body dot append child paragraph. So, new paragraph on pending text node and in the whole body. I mean, I'm appending new paragraph in the body. Alternative method using HTML. Then adjacent people and it passes the specified text of HTML insert in the room. The HTML will be inserted inside the existing div. explain the difference between inner HTML and text content. Inner HTML passes the assigned string as HTML. That means if the string contains HTML tags, they will be interpreted and written. Text content treats everything as plain context. HTML tags are not passed. This is plain text. Because of this difference, inner HTML can be slower and is also less secure. Since if you directly inject user input, it can be accelerated. If the user inputs directly interpreted, it will change the form. And I do malicious JavaScript that runs in Open's browser. This is called cross-site scripting. Got it. Text content is faster and safer. You can see, for example, how do you remove an element? We use the remove child keyword. When removing element, be sure to remove any inserted event does not secure memory. What are array functions and how do they differ from regular functions? So, array functions have more concise syntax. They don't have their own this keyword. Array functions don't have the argument subject. For example, example of this binary difference. Say hello arrow. Say hello. Say hello arrow. And this is the arrow function. Argument subject. What do we mean by argument? I'm just checking if for a normal number we have a normal function we have this keyword or not. Explain the concept of destructuring in JavaScript. Destructuring is a way to extract multiple values from data stored in objects and arrays. What are template literals? Template literals are string literals that allow embedded expressions and multi-line strings. For example, this string literals that allow embedded expressions for multi-line strings. For example, what is spread operator? Explain with example. The spread operator allows an iterable. The spread operator allows an iterable to be expanded in places where zero or more arguments or elements are expected. For example, array1, array2, spreading objects. Counts object1 is equal to a upon b. The spread operator allows an iterable to be expanded in places where zero or more arguments are relevant to restricting. For example, what are default parameters in ESLint 6? Default parameters allow you to set default values for function parameters. Default parameters allow you to set default values for function parameters if no value or undefined is passed. For example, function create yes is length equal to which function purpose. How to use the rest parameter in functions? The rest parameter syntax allows the function to accept an indefinite number of arguments as an array. allow the function to accept an indefinite number of arguments as an array. You can see the example. What is callback and callback? I'll explain the example. So callbacks are functions passed as arguments to other functions, often used for asynchronous operations. Callback here occurs when multiple listed callbacks make code hard to read and maintain. For example, I have this simple function called greet name comma callback, and in the next line I'm calling that function greet with Alice. And a function callback or function passed as arguments to other functions. What is a promise in JavaScript? Consider the example. A promise in a Java is an object representing the eventual completion or failure of an event of an asynchronous operation. Function fetch data, return new promise, zero wrong reject. Seriously. Yeah, sorry guys, I was just checking my Twitter and LinkedIn only. If there are any kind of updates. I actually posted my link on Twitter as well. An object. A promise is an object representing the eventual completion or failure of an asynchronous operation. For example, return a function fetch data, return new promise, resolve comma reject. Return new promise, resolve comma reject. Arrow functions, set arrow. Fetch data dot then dot error dot time. How do you change promises? Promise chaining allows you to perform sequential asynchronous operations. For example, function step 1, function step 2. Then step 1 dot then the result as then step 2 result. And if dot then final result. Promise.all takes an iterable of promises and returns a single promise. It resolves when all the input promises are resolved or rejects if any input promise rejects. What is the purpose of the finally method in promises? The finally method is used to specify the code that should be executed regardless of whether a promise is fulfilled or rejected. The purpose of async await is to simplify the syntax. All related questions remain. The purpose of async await is to simplify the syntax for working with promises, making asynchronous code easier to read and write. It allows you to write asynchronous code that looks and behaves more like synchronous code. The purpose of async await is to simplify the syntax for working with promises, making asynchronous code easier to read and write. It allows you to write asynchronous code that looks and behaves more like synchronous code. For example, how do you handle it? We can enclose our async await function in a try catch block. What is the difference between async and promises? So both async and promises are used to handle asynchronous operations, but the main difference lies in how we write and manage the code. Syntax of async gives more of a synchronous look, making it easy to read and write compared to chaining multiple dots then in promises. With promises, errors are handled using dot catch, while async we can use the familiar try catch block, which feels more natural to developers. Promises, this is not one. Promises rely on dot then by chaining asynchronous tasks, whereas async allows us to use standard JavaScript control flow, which is often cleaner. Async is generally easier to debug because the flow looks sequential, while promises can sometimes be harder to trace. What is the difference between default and name export? A module can have multiple named exports, but only one default export. Named exports are imported using curly braces. Default exports are imported without them. Default exports can be imported with any name, while named exports must be imported with their exact names. Using unless renames using as module name named exports. Where is this? How do you convert JavaScript object to JSON string? JSON.stringify user. How do you pass the JSON string back into a JavaScript project? JSON.parse JSON string. What is local storage in JavaScript? How do you store and retrieve? Local storage is a web storage object that allows you to store key value pairs in the browser with no expiration time. For example, you can set the data using set item, and I can have the key and the value. For retrieving the data, I can use the get item, and I'll just set its key. Okay. For storing and retrieving objects, again set item and get item. What is the difference between local storage and session storage? Local and session storage are both part of the web storage API, which lets us store key value pairs in the browser. The main difference is in how long the data persists. Local storage data is persistent. It remains even if the browser is closed or reopened until it is explicitly cleaned by user or through code. Session storage data is temporary. It's tied to a specific tab or window and is cleared once the page session ends. For example, when a tab is closed. Apart from that, both share the same API and can only store strings. Local storage set item, session storage set item. Now, to delete a specific item, we can use the remove item keyword. And if we want to clear all data, we can just use the clear. Yep, that's it. This is our JavaScript, and let's see how much we have for React. 62 questions, not bad actually. Next.js is a little less. We'll complete Next.js first. So what is the difference between React and Next.js? React.js is actually a front-end JavaScript library, while Next.js is a full-fledged React framework built on top of it. The React.js mainly used for building client-side user interfaces only. With React, we have to handle everything ourselves only, be it routing, state management API calls, and so on. Next.js, it's like React but with superpowers. We got file-based routing, server-side rendering, API routes, image optimization, even SEO benefits. even SEO benefits. We can do full stack stuff with Next.js since it also supports backend logic via API routes. File-based routing, server-side rendering, image optimization, SEO benefits. Difference between library and framework. A library is like a toolbox. We call it when we need. For example, React is a library where we decide how to structure our app, handle routing, etc. Framework is like a blueprint. It calls us. We are following its rules. For example, Next.js is its framework. We have to follow its rules. What is server-side rendering and client-side rendering? Uh, yes, Next.js doesn't React have that feature? Yes, in Next.js we decide when we get to decide how we want to render a page, either on server side, either on the server or in the browser. Server side rendering. In SSR, a page is generated on the server every time a request comes in. It's useful for dynamic data and for boosting SEO since search engines can crawl full HTML content. The server sends a complete HTML page so the user sees something immediately. In client-side rendering, page is rendered inside the browser after the JavaScript loads. Initially, the user sees a loading screener. It's good for dashboard, internal apps, and anything where SEO isn't a big deal. Not by default, React only gives us the UI rendering layer. So if you want SSR in pure React, we would have to manually set up stuff like Node.js, Express, and React now, which can get pretty messy. But Next.js handles all the boilerplate for us, so it's more powerful. If I have client side, then which one should we use, React or Next? If it's purely client side, then dashboard and internal tools, then pure React.js is actually enough. We don't need SEO benefits there because users are logged in and interacting with our app after it loads. But if we want flexibility to add later on, but if we want the flexibility to later add SR or performance SSR APIs, then Next.js can still be smart choice. Even for client-heavy apps, we can choose to render things on client using use client. So yeah, Next.js better performance structure. Yeah, what is SEO? How does it work? SEO stands for search engine optimization. Basically, it's a practice for optimizing a website so that it ranks higher on search engines like Google. If an app is SEO friendly, Google can crawl its content, understand it properly, and show to users when search for something related. The process of SEO in simple terms: search engine crawlers visit our site, they read our page content, meta tags, links, and all that. Based on what I find, our page is indexed and shown to users searching similar stuff. Now, the better the page optimized for keywords, performance marketing structure, the higher it can appear in the search results. But here's the catch in certain application. If the content is loaded after the page loads, React has problems might miss it, hurting your SEO. So if you want a good SEO, we need content to be present right when the page loads. Next, should we go for React.js or REST API? You know what? I'll go for REST API. Then we'll go for Mon and others. Then we'll go for Node and Express, and then finally we'll go for React.js because React.js is long. So yeah. But just before that, we'll take a small break. ब्रेक लेंगे अपन. I checked right my I had to go at 9, right? Handle Netflix. Drop frames. Oh shit. Hey guys. Drop frames. Thankfully, I'm live. So, right. So, what is an API? An API is an application programming interface. Basically, an API is basically a way for two sessions to talk to each other. It defines set of rules and endpoints that allow one application to request data, perform operations. Alright, I'm back. What is an API? An API is basically a way for two systems to talk to each other. Define set of rules or endpoints that allow one application to request data or perform operations on another. Example in a merge stack, the front-end React might call an Express API to fetch user data from MongoDB. I'm doing some other work right now, but yeah, I'll see you later, guys. What?